Once again, happy to be along on this Sunday morning. It's time for our public access programming on our 5 radio stations on the island of Oahu, 4 on the island of Maui, and the 5 radio stations that we have on Kauai, all encompassing the H-Hawaii Media family of radio stations, also available at hawaiistream.fm and Line 365. I'm Johnny Merrill. Another important topic, a very important topic to discuss, and it revolves around, well, the First Amendment, free speech. And Hawaii has become the first state in the nation to pass a law prohibiting corporations, nonprofits, unions, and other organized groups from spending money to influence state elections and ballot measures. Now, supporters say the law, known as Act 11, restores fairness to Hawaii's political process. Critics say it goes too far, silencing not just big corporations, but civic groups, cultural organizations, and labor unions throughout the state. Hawaii's own Attorney General at Lopez warned lawmakers repeatedly that the bill was likely unconstitutional, but it passed the legislature 74-1 and was signed into law by Governor Green in May. So joining me today is Dr. Keli'i Akina, President and CEO of the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii. His organization is challenging Act 11 in court, arguing that it violates the First Amendment rights of every nonprofit, union, and community group in the state. Today we'll discuss what Act 11 actually does, who it affects, and why the Grassroots Institute believes Hawaii residents' free speech rights are at stake. Great to have you along this Sunday morning, Dr. Akina. Good morning.
Aloha, Johnny. It's great to be with you and your listeners, as always.
For listeners just tuning in, what exactly is Act 11 and why is the Grassroots Institute challenging it in court?
Act 11 is a brand new law produced in this last 2026 legislative session that infringes upon the First Amendment rights of the people. Specifically, Act 11 prohibits all organized groups, nonprofits, unions, civic associations, neighborhood boards, from spending anything to influence Hawaii elections or measures that are on a ballot. Now, spending is a vague term, and as far as this law goes, it can be very broad. So it's not just about donating to a candidate. It could cover educational efforts like mailings or publications and discussion of a ballot issue or even positions that candidates take. Think about the groups that make up the fabric of our community: a local trade association, a union, a local environmental group. Act 11 silences all of them. For Grassroots Institute specifically, it would prevent us from doing the core work of our mission, which is educating Hawaii residents on ballot measures and policy issues that affect their daily lives. We believe it's a clear violation of the First Amendment, and that's why we're standing up on behalf of the public at large so that the courts will review this.
And just to follow up on that, with new technology, would text messages fall into that category?
Any medium can contain free speech, and to that extent, it could be applicable, yes.
Okay, well, most people hear campaign finance law, Dr. Akina. They think of corporations and big money, of course. Who does this law actually affect?
Well, that's the reason it's important to read laws very carefully, because this may surprise people. Act 11 covers every quote-unquote artificial person. Now, that's a scary term, but it's a very specific term under the law. That includes nonprofit organizations, labor unions, neighborhood associations, cultural organizations, and civic groups of all kinds. Unions formally opposed this bill because they recognized that it would silence them just as much as anyone else. Environmental groups, advocacy organizations, community foundations, they'll be all affected across the political spectrum, regardless of what they stand for. The only voices left with full freedom to spend on ballot issues are going to be wealthy individuals who can self-fund. So if anything, this law favors the super rich over ordinary citizens who have to pool their resources together. So it really weakens the voice of ordinary citizens.
Speaking with Dr. Keli'i Akina, President and CEO of the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii. His organization is challenging Act 11 in court, arguing that it violates the First Amendment rights of every nonprofit, union, and community group in the state. So How does Act 11, Dr. Akina, directly impact the Grassroots Institute and the work you do here in Hawaii?
Well, Grassroots Institute's core mission is to educate the public on policy issues that affect Hawaii residents. For example, housing or healthcare, taxation or economic opportunity. Now, this new law, Act 11, would bar us from speaking out on any state or county ballot measure. And that strikes directly at our ability to fulfill that mission. Mm-hmm. For example, if there were a ballot measure proposing a new statewide property tax or an empty homes tax, we could not run any public education campaign about it because we would be breaking the law. The direct, concrete harm to our organization is also why we have legal standing to bring this case to court, because we as an organization are affected. But I want to stress, this is not about the Grassroots Institute. It's about the freedom of speech of all organizations. And this is something that has a broad impact upon any organized group that wants to speak out on a ballot measure, for example.
And at the outset, I mentioned that Hawaii's own Attorney General raised serious concerns about this bill before it passed. What did the AG actually say?
Well, the Attorney General's office warned lawmakers multiple times that the bill was likely unconstitutional and that they would not be able to defend the law in court. They flagged that it could impose content-based restrictions on speech that courts have consistently struck down. They also warned it could expose Hawaii taxpayers to significant litigation costs. Yet despite this concern, lawmakers moved forward anyway, 74-1, and it was signed immediately by the governor.
And then what's the core constitutional argument that you're making? And why does Grassroots believe this law crosses a line?
Well, the First Amendment protects not just the right to speak, but the right to organize with others to make your voice heard. People don't lose their constitutional rights simply because they act together through a nonprofit, union, or community group. The Supreme Court has held that the government cannot reduce the right of assembly to what we call a party of one. Joining resources to be heard is how most ordinary citizens exercise their First Amendment rights. Act 11 crosses the line by giving government the power to decide which voices are permitted to participate in public debate and which must stay silent.
Some supporters, Dr. Akina, of Act 11 would say this is simply just about getting money out of politics, right? And giving power back to the everyday voters. How do you respond to that?
Well, we understand that concern, and transparency in politics is something we definitely support and have done so for a long time. But Act 11 doesn't actually get money out of politics. It just shifts power toward wealthy individuals who can self-fund, while silencing the organizations that everyday citizens rely on to have a collective voice. The answer to concerns about money in politics is more transparency and disclosure. It's not silencing every nonprofit and civic group in the state.
Now, are there any other states watching what happens here in Hawaii?
Oh, definitely, Johnny. 14 other states have introduced similar legislation, and Hawaii is being watched very closely as a national test case. The DC-based Center for American Progress is openly driving this effort nationally and has acknowledged using Hawaii to test this legal theory. If Act 11 survives our challenge, it becomes a blueprint for other states to silence nonprofits and civic organizations in the very same way. That's part of why this case matters well beyond our borders here in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm. So exactly what are you asking the court to do, and what happens to Act 11 while the case is being heard?
Well, we're asking the court to review Act 11 and determine whether it violates First Amendment protections. Specifically, we want the court to strike down Act 11 as unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. Our legal partner in doing so is the Institute for Free Speech. It's a nonpartisan First Amendment organization with a strong track record litigating these kinds of cases across the political spectrum.
All right, Dr. Akina, now if the court rules in your favor, what would you like the lawmakers to do differently to address concerns about campaign finance without violating those constitutional protections?
I hope that lawmakers will definitely make use of existing provisions to deal with campaign finance abuse. There are many fine laws that have been introduced here in the state of Hawaii, and they need to be enforced. We support that. And if lawmakers also want to clean up the legislation that eventually turned into Act 11, we'll be glad to consult with them on that. We're acting now because Act 11 does harm. It may not be the intention of those who framed the bill that became Act 11, but the outcome, the actual document, violates the First Amendment rights of Hawaii citizens. And that's something that needs to be responded to immediately.
You mentioned like 14 other states are closely watching it. Do you expect this case to remain here, or do you believe it could eventually reach the U.S. Supreme Court?
Well, that's how the legal system works. A ruling at a lower level can be appealed to a higher level. Our friends at the Institute for Free Speech are committed to fighting against Act 11, no matter how long it takes, no matter how high it goes, all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary.
Dr. Keli'i Akina, the President and CEO of Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, appreciate his time on a very important issue, Act 11. And where can listeners go to learn more about this case and then follow along as it moves through the courts?
Well, Johnny, thank you for asking that. We would really welcome listeners to visit our website, which will have good information on this case and on other policy issues. Listeners can visit grassrootinstitute.org. That's grassrootinstitute.org and look for updates. In fact, if you go to grassrootinstitute.org/Act 11, you'll get the latest information. But you can also sign up for our email newsletter at the website, and we'll keep you informed. We want Hawaii residents to stay informed, because if we're blindsided by laws that are made quickly and without consideration of the Constitution fully, we're going to regret it deeply. This year, we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. What a wonderful document. And in that document, we have the philosophy and the concept of rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which are used as a foundation for the rights that we have today, such as the right to free speech. It's time to celebrate, but also to defend the right to free speech. And that's what we're doing with our response to Act 11.
Dr. Keli'i Akina, President and CEO of the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii. Thanks for joining us this morning. Keep an eye on this, and if anything comes up, we'll definitely be in touch once again. Appreciate it. Have a great remainder of your Sunday.
Aloha, Johnny. Thank you.